When I heard the first sound again, it wasn't just the beeping of a heart monitor. It was the sound of a life. I had almost lost a life I had been too afraid to reclaim. For the past 12 years, my world had been nothing but silence, a silence that crept into every corner of my old farmhouse, nestled deep in the countryside. There was a time when this place echoed with the sound of music, the hum of conversations, and the laughter that filled the rooms like sunlight. But now all that remained was a hollow emptiness. I would walk through the rooms, each one a ghost of the past. The floors creaked beneath my steps, and the walls, once alive with the sounds of life, now stood still silent. Even the wind, which used to sing through the trees outside, seemed to have forgotten how to make a sound. Every day I sat in this quiet, waiting for something, anything to break through. Then one gray Thursday morning, the letter came. I had never expected it. It came from the Riverstone Medical Institute, stamped with their logo. I knew immediately what it was. The letter was thick, the paper creamy and crisp. My fingers hesitated over it as I sat at my desk. Inside, they explained a neural implant procedure, a chance to restore my hearing. It wasn't a guarantee, but the results in previous patients had been promising. The letter spoke of hope, of a world I hadn't heard in years. 80% of patients regained full auditory function within 6 months. The rest at least partial hearing, enough to distinguish voices, to hear laughter without reading lips. Enough to hear the little things, footsteps in the hallway, the wind rustling the leaves outside, the sound of a door creaking open. And maybe, just maybe, I could hear him, the one voice that had haunted me, most of all the voice of my son, Adrian. I stared at the letter for what felt like an eternity. I wanted so badly to say yes, to grasp that sliver of hope, but something inside me hesitated. Did I truly want to re-enter a world full of noise? The world I had learned to avoid? The world that seemed so different after all this time? The silence, though heavy at times, had become my companion, my refuge. What would it mean to return to the chaos of sound? Would I be able to handle it, or would the noise drown me once again? I folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into the envelope. Tucking it away beneath a stack of old symphony programs in my desk drawer, I couldn't help but wonder, what if I didn't take the chance? Would I lose myself in the noise? Or maybe, would I finally be found again? The letter from Riverstone Medical Institute sat in the drawer for days, as if it were a message from another life, a life I wasn't sure I wanted to return to. The promise of hearing again, of reconnecting with a world I had left behind so many years ago, seemed like both a gift and a curse. Every time I thought about it, I felt a twinge of panic. Could I truly go back to a life filled with noise, filled with people, after so much time in my quiet world? And yet the thought of hearing again, of hearing my son's voice, of hearing music fill the house, those thoughts stirred something deep inside me. I was lost in those thoughts one morning, sipping my tea, alone at the breakfast table. The house was silent as it had been for years. No footsteps running through the hall, no laughter echoing from the living room. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of birds outside, muffled by the thick walls of the house. My hands shook slightly as I set my teacup down. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to make a decision that would change everything. But I knew I had to talk to someone. Emily, my daughter, had become a stranger to me over the years. It wasn't her fault, of course, but I had to admit that the distance between us had only grown. When I first lost my hearing, she had been my rock. She visited me often, checking in on me, making sure I wasn't lonely. But as the years passed, those visits grew shorter. Her phone calls became fewer, always brief and distant, filled with pleasantries, but no real connection. And I began to feel like an inconvenience, a shadow in her busy life. The thought of telling Emily about the surgery felt like admitting to her that I needed something from her, something I wasn't sure I could bear. The idea of her pity, of seeing me as a helpless mother who needed fixing, it hurt more than I could explain. So I kept the letter a secret. It felt safer that way. But there was someone else I could turn to: Claire, my sister. We had always been close, sharing so many of the same memories, the same quiet moments. She had always understood me in a way no one else did. So that morning after breakfast, I picked up the phone and dialed her number. "Claire," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I need to talk to you about something." She was on the other end almost immediately, her voice warm and familiar. "Of course, Jane. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. I got a letter from the Riverstone Medical Institute. They say they can restore my hearing. There's a surgery. I don't know if I should do it. There was a long silence on the other end, and I could almost hear Claire's mind working. When she finally spoke, her voice was full of warmth and hope. "Jane, that's amazing. It's what you've wanted, isn't it? You've been so lonely, so isolated these last few years. This could change everything for you." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know, but—" My voice caught in my throat. "I don't know if I'm ready. What if I can't handle it? What if everything changes and I don't like it? What if I'm not ready to hear everything again?" There was a brief pause before Claire's voice softened. "It's a big decision, but you've been living in silence for so long, Jane. Maybe it's time to give yourself the chance to hear again, to reconnect with the world, with your family, with yourself." I felt tears prick my eyes and I wiped them away quickly. "I'm just afraid, Claire. I'm afraid of what it means. What if I don't want to return to the noise? What if it's too much?" Claire's voice was steady and reassuring. "You don't have to decide today. But if you want to hear again, if you want to feel that connection, I think you should go for it. It's not about what the world expects from you. It's about what you need, Jane. And if you need to hear again, I'm here for you." Her words settled into my heart like a balm. Claire had always been the one to encourage me to take the leap, to do what I thought was impossible. She was right. I didn't have to make the decision alone, but I also wasn't sure I was ready to share this with anyone else, especially Emily. "I haven't told anyone else," I said quietly. "I haven't told Emily. She's been distant, and I'm not sure how to say it to her. I'm not sure I want her pity." Claire's voice softened again, understanding in every word. "I get it. But Jane, I think you might be surprised. Emily may have distanced herself, but that doesn't mean she doesn't care. Maybe she's just waiting for you to ask for help. You don't have to carry this burden alone." I sat back in my chair, her words lingering in my mind. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe Emily had been waiting for me to reach out. But it didn't change how I felt, the ache of loneliness that had settled in my chest, the fear that if I opened up, I would be seen as weak. "I don't know, Claire. I'm just not ready," I whispered. She didn't push me. Instead, she said, "I understand. You don't have to tell her today or tomorrow. Just know that I'm here for you. And when you're ready, we'll talk more about it." After hanging up with Claire, I sat in the stillness of the house, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The letter from Riverstone was still in the drawer, its promise still waiting, but I wasn't sure I was ready to reach for it just yet. I needed time to think, to understand what this decision truly meant. But for now, I would hold on to the quiet. And maybe when I was ready, I would finally take the step into a world full of sound. The evening was quieter than usual. The soft glow of the dining room chandelier bathed everything in a warm amber light. But the warmth in the room didn't quite reach me. It had been weeks since Emily and her husband Richard had come by for dinner. The silence between us seemed to stretch further every time we met. Still, it was a Thursday evening, and the house felt empty without them. So I decided to invite them over. I had spent the afternoon preparing dinner, something simple but comforting. Roast chicken with mashed potatoes and green beans. My mother's old recipe, the one I always made when I wanted to feel connected to the past. It was one of the few things that still felt familiar in this house. When they arrived, it was as if I were standing outside my own life. Emily, once so full of energy and warmth, now greeted me with a stiff hug. Her smile was polite but distant, her eyes searching the room more than they met mine. Richard, ever the professional, offered me a tight handshake, as though he were greeting a colleague rather than family. There was no joy in their faces, no comfort in their gestures. We sat down at the table, and as we began to eat, I couldn't help but notice how carefully they spoke to me. Every word was deliberate, as if I might break if they said anything wrong. Emily, her voice soft and slow, asked how I had been. It was an old routine now, her asking in that way, and me answering with the same practiced responses. "Fine," I said, "just fine." But in reality, I felt as if the space between us had grown into a chasm that neither of us was willing to cross. Richard, always eager to jump in with his thoughts, began talking about the family estate. "We've been thinking, Jane," he started, his voice clipped and businesslike. "It's probably time to simplify things around here. You've got a lot to manage, and we could really help with that." Simplify. The word hung in the air like a shadow. Simplify meant change, meant letting go. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure if I ever would be. "Emily and I have been talking," Richard continued, "and it might be time to sell the summer cabin by the lake. It's just too much to keep up with, especially with everything going on." Emily nodded beside him, her hands folded neatly on her lap, not looking at me. I felt a sinking feeling in my chest, a heaviness that I couldn't shake. The summer cabin had been a place of peace for me, a refuge from the world. I had spent so many summers there with my family, and even after everything, it still held memories of laughter and love. The thought of selling it just like that felt like a betrayal to everything it had meant. But Emily's gaze directed at the table told me she had already made up her mind. "It's just too big of a responsibility for you." Mom, Emily added, her voice more gentle but still distant. "We need to move forward, you know." I nodded, forcing a smile. But inside, I felt as though I were being erased. This was my home. These were my memories. And yet here I sat, feeling like a spectator in my own life. The decisions were being made for me, about me, without me. It wasn't the first time. Over the years, as my hearing deteriorated, I had slowly faded into the background of my own family story. As the conversation continued, I couldn't help but notice how they spoke around me, not with me. They discussed the cabin, the estate, and what needed to be done. There was no mention of what I wanted, of what I felt. They were focused on moving forward, on making life easier for themselves, and in the process, I felt invisible. Emily, still avoiding my gaze, casually mentioned how it might be time to let go of the house as well. "You've been talking about downsizing for a while, haven't you, Mom?" she said. "Maybe it's time to think about moving somewhere smaller. A condo, perhaps? Something more manageable?" A condo? The very idea felt alien to me. This house was my home. Every corner, every creak in the floorboards held a piece of my history. The thought of leaving it behind felt like tearing out a part of me. But once again, Emily had already decided. It was as if the decisions had already been made without even considering what I might want. I felt a lump form in my throat, and I fought to keep it down. My mind raced, but I said nothing. Instead, I smiled politely, pretending to be okay with everything. I had done it for years. I had learned how to mask my true feelings, how to become a silent participant in my own life. And tonight, it was no different. Dinner passed quietly after that, with Richard talking about market fluctuations and Emily chiming in with the occasional comment. There was no warmth, no connection, just business, just transactions. My heart ached with the knowledge that my daughter and her husband had already made plans for me, plans I had no say in. When the evening ended, Richard kissed me on the cheek with his usual formality, and Emily offered a quick hug. It wasn't what it used to be. There was no genuine affection, no sense of homecoming. It felt more like a routine, an obligation. As they left, I stood in the doorway watching them walk to their car. They didn't look back. They never did anymore. And as I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of the silence settle back over the house. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, a silence that told me I was no longer needed in the way I once was. I turned to the empty room, the stillness wrapping around me. Was this what my life had become? Decisions being made for me while I stood by waiting for anything to break through. I couldn't say for sure. But one thing was clear, I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change, and maybe it was time for me to make that change. After Emily and Richard left, I stayed behind to clean up the quiet of the house, almost deafening in its own way. The sounds of the dishes clinking together, the soft shuffle of my slippers on the kitchen tiles, they were the only noise in the otherwise still home. It was a habit, this quiet solitude. I had become so accustomed to it over the years that I didn't even mind the silence anymore. As I stood at the sink, scrubbing at a stubborn spot on a plate, my thoughts wandered back to the conversation at dinner. The way they had spoken to me as though I were no longer fully present in my own life. How easily they decided for me, assuming they knew best. The idea of selling the house, the cabin, the way they suggested I move into something smaller, all of it had unsettled me. But I'd kept quiet. I always did. I finished cleaning the dishes and carried them to the dining room. The house felt emptier with each passing day, and I couldn't ignore the growing discomfort in my chest. After all, they were family. Weren't they supposed to care? Wasn't I supposed to matter in their decisions? But the way they had spoken about me like I was a burden to be managed left a bitter taste in my mouth. I took a deep breath, setting the plates on the table to dry, when I heard voices, soft at first, then clearer, as I walked down the hallway to the kitchen. At first I thought it was just the hum of the refrigerator, but then I realized it was them, Emily and Richard. They had stayed outside in the driveway talking longer than I expected, but as I walked closer to the hallway, I paused. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the words like shards of glass sliced through the quiet. She's slipping. Richard Emily's voice was low, almost inaudible, but the bitterness in it was unmistakable. She can't make decisions anymore. Did you see how long it took her to respond to the estate question? She doesn't even remember what she owns anymore. The words hit me like a slap, and for a moment I froze. But I couldn't move. I had to hear more. Richard's voice followed, his tone flat but decisive. She's never going to be able to manage it all on her own. She's too far gone. We'll have to start taking control, not just of the estate, but her finances too. The foundation is going to lock everything up eventually. We'll need to act fast. If we get everything transferred now, we can handle it. My heart pounded in my chest, and I pressed my hand against the wall for support. My mind raced the weight of their words sinking in. They weren't just planning to take over the house and the cabin, they were planning to take everything. All the decisions, all the control over what had once been mine were being taken from me without my consent. I wasn't just a bystander in my own life. I was being erased. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about my dignity, my autonomy. I had been treated like a ghost in my own family, and now I could hear their true intentions. They thought I wouldn't know. They thought I wouldn't be able to understand. A wave of pain rushed through me, sharp and raw, but I swallowed it down. There was no room for weakness now. I had to stay calm. I had to think. I could feel the anger building inside me, but I forced myself to stay composed. I couldn't let them see me falter. Not now, not when I was just starting to understand how much power I still had. I waited a moment longer, hearing Richard agree with Emily. His voice was low, but I could hear the satisfaction in it. It's for the best, he said. She won't even realize what's happening. Once she's gone, it'll all be smoother for everyone. We'll have everything in place. Gone. That word echoed in my mind, as if I were already dead, as if I had already faded from existence. But I wasn't gone. I was still here, and I wasn't going to let them take everything without a fight. I stepped back quietly, retreating into the shadows of the hallway. My heart still hammered in my chest, but I knew I had to bide my time. I wasn't ready to confront them just yet. I didn't have all the pieces, not yet. But I would. I had to. I had waited so long for this opportunity to stand up for myself, to make my voice heard again. The surgery was coming up soon. I had already decided I would do it. I would go through with the procedure. And when my hearing was fully restored, when I could finally hear everything clearly, I would confront them. I would expose their lies, their manipulations, and take control of my life again. But for now, I would remain silent. I would let them think they had won. I would play the role they expected of me, silent, compliant, invisible. But I wouldn't stay that way forever. I would wait. I would listen. And when the time was right, I would reclaim what was mine. The weight of the silence in the house felt different now, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I could hear it now, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant noise of traffic outside, the sound of my own heartbeat. I could hear the world coming back to me, and with it I would reclaim my power. It was time to take action, but I would wait until I could truly hear everything they had said, every word, every whisper. And then I would make my move. The days leading up to the surgery felt like an eternity. The decision had been made, there was no turning back now. I had been living in silence for so long it had almost become a part of me. But as the date of the procedure drew closer, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anxiety and hope bubbling up inside me. Hope that I might be able to hear again, that the world I had shut myself off from for so long might finally open up to me. But there was also fear, the fear of the unknown, of a world that had changed in ways I hadn't yet experienced, of a soundscape that might overwhelm me. Would I still recognize the world around me? Would I be able to cope with the flood of noise that might come rushing back? I arrived at the hospital early that morning, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nose as I was led through the cold hallways. The nurses were kind, their voices warm and comforting, but everything still felt so distant. They took my vitals, checked my paperwork, and I couldn't help but notice how their faces seemed to flicker in and out of focus, like they were characters in a world I had no real place in anymore. When they wheeled me into the operating room, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The doctors and nurses worked quickly, and though I tried to focus on their voices, all I could hear was the soft whoosh of the machines and the beeping of the monitors. The world felt muted, as if I were standing just outside it, watching it all unfold. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took over was the gentle touch of the nurse on my arm. "You're in good hands," she had said, but the words didn't fully register. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness take over, and then there was nothing. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the sound. It was faint at first, almost like a dream, the soft, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. I could feel it steady and persistent, pulsing in the background like a heartbeat of the world. It wasn't loud or overwhelming, but it was there, the sound of life. I blinked a few times, trying to clear the fog from my mind. The recovery room was dim quiet, except for the soft hum of machines and the distant murmur of voices. For a moment, I couldn't quite place what was happening. I wasn't sure if I was still dreaming or if this was real. But then there it was again, the faintest sound of footsteps. Light, purposeful steps, like someone walking in the hallway just outside the room. I could hear them clearly, like they were right next to me. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just the beeping of machines. This was something else. It was the sound of the world I had lost. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly, as I reached up to touch my ears. I could hear everything. The world had returned to me, not in a rush, but in a gentle flood, like a stream of water slowly rising to fill a dry riverbed. The sounds were different, softer somehow, as though I had been listening from a distance for so long that now everything was new. But it was real. It was here. I could hear. A voice broke through my thoughts, soft but clear. "Jane, can you hear me?" It was Dr. Grayson. His voice was steady, full of caution, but also warmth. I turned toward him, my eyes focusing on his face. I hadn't realized how much I had missed seeing people's faces as they spoke to me. I wanted to smile, but my lips felt stiff, unfamiliar. "Yes," I whispered, and the sound of my own voice startled me. It was thin, almost tentative, like a rusted hinge creaking open for the first time in years. But it was there. It was me. Dr. Grayson smiled a proud, knowing smile. "Remarkable," he said, his voice full of amazement. "Most patients don't respond this quickly." "You're doing great, Jane." I nodded slowly, still processing the magnitude of what was happening. The beeping of the heart monitor, the faint murmur of voices outside the room, even the distant hum of a coffee machine down the hallway, it was all so vivid. The world felt alive, full of sounds I had long forgotten. My mind raced with all the things I had missed: my son's voice, the sound of laughter, the rustle of paper, the wind through the trees. But there was one sound that lingered in the back of my mind, one sound I needed to hear more than anything else. I needed to hear Adrian, but that would have to wait. There was still so much to process. For now, I focused on the present, on the fact that I could hear again. My body felt lighter, as though I had been carrying the weight of silence for so long that now, with this newfound sense of sound, I could finally breathe again. The nurse came over to check my vitals, her movements calm and efficient. She spoke to me, but her words were lost in the jumble of sounds I was still trying to sort through. There was so much to take in, so many new noises, each one competing for attention. The soft ticking of a clock on the wall, the whisper of the air conditioning, the murmur of other patients in nearby rooms. It was overwhelming, but at the same time it was beautiful, a symphony of life that had been silent for so long. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sounds wash over me. I could hear everything now, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a renewed sense of purpose, a connection to the world that had once seemed so far away. I didn't know what the future held, or how I would navigate this new world of sound, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The world was open to me again, and I was ready to face it. The days following the surgery passed in a blur of new sounds, new sensations, and a world that, though familiar, felt entirely new to me. Every footstep, every voice, every small creak of the floor beneath my feet felt like a discovery. I hadn't realized how much I had been missing, not just the sounds themselves, but the sense of connection they brought, connection to the people around me, to the world I had closed myself off from. But even as the world seemed to open up, something deep inside me told me that I hadn't heard it all yet. The sounds, though overwhelming at times, were not the only things I had been missing. There were the words that had been spoken when I wasn't listening, words that were never meant for my ears. And that thought, that suspicion lingered at the back of my mind. I wasn't wrong. It happened one afternoon when I was walking down the hallway, trying to navigate the still familiar sounds of the house. The rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the soft rustling of the leaves outside the world, was still an orchestra in my ears, each sound distinct and alive. I was heading toward the kitchen when I heard them, Emily and Richard. Their voices were muffled at first, but I could still make out the sharpness in their tones as they spoke just outside the door. I paused instinctively, pressing my back against the wall, the sound of their conversation now more distinct than ever before. "It's getting harder to hide it." Richard's voice was low, cautious, but the words cut through the air like a blade. "We need to move quickly, Emily. If we don't act now, we'll lose the opportunity." Emily's voice followed, tinged with frustration. I know, but we can't just do this overnight. She's still got a lot of control, even with her hearing loss. If she finds out, she'll fight us. We need to make sure she's out of the picture before we do anything." My breath caught in my throat. I had suspected for some time now that something wasn't right, little things here and there that didn't add up. But hearing their voices, hearing the coldness with which they discussed me, my own family, my daughter, my flesh and blood, it felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open. "We're already over the line," Richard said, his tone sharp now, as if the gravity of the situation was dawning on him. "We've transferred over half the assets already. The house, the investments, everything she owns is now tied up in our names. All we need is her approval on the rest of the paperwork. Once she signs it, it's done. She won't even know what hit her. We'll have it all." I could feel my heart sinking in my chest, the weight of their words pressing down on me. The betrayal was one thing, but hearing it so plainly, hearing the plans they had made behind my back, it was a slap in the face. This wasn't about caring for me, about ensuring my well-being. This was about them, their future, their gains, all built on my ignorance. Once she's gone, everything will be much easier. Richard added, his words lingering in the air. We can finally be free of the burden of looking after her. It'll be just the two of us, and we can move on. The phrase, once she's gone, repeated itself in my mind like an echo, as if I were already dead, as if I didn't matter anymore. They saw me as a mere obstacle, something to be moved aside. My life, my legacy, my memories, they weren't mine anymore. They were merely pawns in a game they had already decided to play without me. I could feel the blood rushing to my head, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. How dare they? How dare they use me, manipulate me, plan my future, without even bothering to include me? But I couldn't act on impulse. I couldn't rush into something that would destroy everything. I needed to be calm to think this through. I needed to protect myself, to make sure that they didn't take everything from me without a fight. I turned and walked away quietly back to my study, my thoughts racing with everything I had just heard. I couldn't confront them now, not with everything so fresh, not with the weight of their words hanging in the air. But I wasn't going to let them win. I wouldn't be a victim in their scheme. I sat down at my desk, staring at the phone in front of me. I had no choice now. I needed help. I needed someone who could stand by me, who could protect me and my future. Someone who wouldn't let them get away with it. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and dialed the number of the lawyer I had worked with years ago. He would help me. He would ensure that my assets were protected, that my home was safe, and that Emily and Richard's deceitful plans would never come to fruition. Hello, Warren, it's Jane. I said, my voice steady but firm. I need your help. I need a private audit. Every account, every asset, every transaction tied to my name, everything they've been doing behind my back. I need it all reviewed, and I need you to help me take back control. His response was immediate, reassuring. Of course, Jane, I'll start today. I hung up the phone, a sense of resolve settling over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance. I had the power to protect myself, to reclaim what was mine. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. I wasn't going to be the victim of their schemes. I had heard enough, and now I was ready to fight. A week passed since the fateful conversation, and in that time, my resolve had only hardened. I had contacted Warren the lawyer and set things in motion. Every piece of their plan was now under review. Every transaction they had made behind my back was being scrutinized. The truth would come to light, and they wouldn't be able to hide behind their lies for much longer. But I wasn't going to wait around quietly. No, I needed to take control now to assert my place in my own life again. I had no intention of letting Emily and Richard think that their little scheme had gone unnoticed. They believed I was deaf, incapacitated, a helpless old woman to be maneuvered and manipulated, but the truth was I had been listening. I had heard everything. The doorbell rang early one afternoon, cutting through the stillness of the house. My heart skipped a beat. Emily and Richard had come by. They were eager, no doubt, to finalize their plans to try and push me further into the shadows of my own life. But today would be different. Today I would no longer be the passive observer. Today I would speak the truth. I walked to the front door. My footsteps measured the familiar creak of the floor beneath me, somehow grounding me. When I opened it, there they stood, Emily, smiling stiffly, her eyes avoiding mine, and Richard standing a little too tall, like a man who thought he had the upper hand. Mom? We've been meaning to talk, Emily began, but there was a hesitancy in her voice, a tension I could feel even before she said another word. Richard didn't speak. He just nodded, his usual air of superiority, trying to mask his discomfort. Come in, I said, my voice calm, almost too calm. I think it's time we had that conversation. They stepped inside, their eyes immediately scanning the room. I could feel them assessing the house as if already imagining it being sold, already planning for what would come next. They didn't realize I had already seen their plans, heard their intentions. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us hanging like a heavy fog. The conversation began like it always did. Emily mentioned the estate, Richard chimed in about the cabin, and then the talk turned to the family investments and the future. They talked as though I wasn't even there, as if I were just a figurehead, a woman with no agency, left no voice to speak up. But I did have a voice, and today I was going to use it. I waited until they had finished discussing their plans, the words tumbling out of them with such ease as though they truly believed they were in control. When the silence settled, I finally spoke, my voice measured but firm. "I've been listening," I said, my gaze unwavering. Emily's eyes widened slightly, and Richard's posture stiffened, but neither of them spoke. "I heard everything, every word you've said, every plan you've made." They froze, and for the first time in years I could see the vulnerability in their eyes. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me to hear them. "I know what you've been up to," I continued, my voice steady, no tremor of uncertainty in it. "The transfers, the manipulations, the way you've used me as a pawn in your game. You thought I wouldn't notice, thought I wouldn't understand, but I did." The room seemed to shrink around us, the air thick with tension. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hands clasped tightly together. Richard, for the first time, looked unsure. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand silencing him. "I'm not some helpless old woman," I said, my voice now carrying the weight of the words I had kept silent for so long. "I may have been quiet, but that doesn't mean I didn't see the truth. I was just waiting for the right moment, and now that moment has come." I stood up, walking over to the side table where I had placed a document. I picked it up slowly, deliberately, as they watched me, their expressions a mix of surprise and apprehension. "This," I said, holding up the document, "is the revised will, the one I've had drawn up over the past week. You no longer have access to my estate. You are no longer in control of my finances. I've revoked your privileges, Emily. Richard, your influence is gone." The words hung in the air like a verdict, and I could see their reactions, the shock in their eyes, the disbelief. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me to fight back. "Warren is handling the transfer," I continued, my eyes now meeting theirs with quiet authority. "Everything is being taken care of, and the assets are being redirected. You have no claim to anything here, not anymore." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but I didn't let her speak. "You've taken enough," I said, my tone cold. "You've used me, manipulated me, and I've allowed it for too long. But no more. This ends today." Richard finally found his voice. "You can't do this, Jane," he said, his voice rising in anger. "This isn't right. You don't know what you're doing." I smiled a small, knowing smile. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, Richard. It's you who doesn't understand. You've underestimated me for far too long, and now I'm taking back what's mine." I turned to Emily, her face pale with shock, her lips trembling. "I've loved you, Emily," I said softly, my voice still steady, but filled with an undeniable sadness. "But I can't allow you to do this to me, not anymore." They sat in stunned silence, neither of them knowing what to say. They had thought they could take everything from me. They had thought I was weak. But in that moment, I had reclaimed my power, my voice, and my future. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was no longer the silence of submission. It was the silence of someone who had found their strength again. "I suggest you leave," I said, calmly, still holding the document in my hand, "before things get any more difficult for you." Richard opened his mouth to argue, but Emily stood quickly, her face a mask of anger and disbelief. Without a word, they both left the room, their footsteps echoing down the hall as they left the house. I stood there for a moment, watching the door close behind them, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had taken control, and this time I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me again. After the confrontation with Emily and Richard, I stood there for a moment, the silence of the room settling around me. It was a different kind of silence now, one that no longer carried the weight of subjugation, but the quiet of a woman who had taken back her power. The house felt different, alive with the energy of my reclaimed strength. The fear, the uncertainty, the lingering ache of years spent feeling invisible, it was all gone. I had found my voice again. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from their expectations, free from their manipulations. The weight that had once settled so heavily on my shoulders, the weight of living in silence, had lifted. In its place was clarity, a sense of peace, and the quiet power that came with standing firm in my truth. I was no longer a passive observer in my own life. I was the one who called the shots now. I had done what I had once thought was impossible, and in doing so I had reclaimed more than just my finances. I had reclaimed my life. I walked to the corner of the room where my piano stood untouched for so long. The keys, once so familiar, now seemed foreign under my fingertips. But as I sat down and placed my hands on the keys, a sense of warmth washed over me. This was where I had found my joy, my peace, so many years ago. I had abandoned this part of myself, thinking I was too old, too disconnected from the world to ever play again. But now, with the clarity of my newfound freedom, I felt the music within me rise. I played not with perfection, but with raw emotion. Each note was an expression of everything I had been through, every loss, every moment of silence, every tear. The music flowed from me, unrestrained, and for the first time it felt like I was truly alive. I was rediscovering a part of myself I had lost, and in doing so, I was reclaiming my voice. Later that day, I walked through the quiet countryside surrounding my home, the path winding through the trees, the gentle rustle of the leaves accompanying me. The world, once muffled and distant, now felt vibrant with sound. The wind in the branches, the distant calls of birds, the soft crunch of the earth beneath my feet. It was all so clear, so alive. I wasn't defined by my silence anymore. I was defined by my strength, my resilience. The world no longer felt like a place to retreat from. It was a place to step into, to embrace. And as I walked, I knew that my journey was far from over. This was just the beginning, a new chapter one, where I would no longer be afraid of what the world might hear. I would be the one to define my story from here on out. The story of Jane's journey to reclaim her voice is a powerful reminder of the dangers of living in silence, both literally and figuratively. For years, Jane allowed herself to fade into the background, overlooked and manipulated by the very people who were supposed to love and care for her. She was silenced not just by the loss of her hearing, but by her own fears and doubts, by the weight of expectations imposed on her. But when she finally chose to confront the truth, to hear the world around her, and to stand firm in her power, she awakened to the reality that we are not defined by our past, nor by the voices of others. We are defined by our own choices, our own strength. I believe that too often society expects us to remain passive, to be silent, and to let others make decisions on our behalf, especially as we grow older. Jane's story is a call to break free from these constraints. It's a call to reclaim our voices, to stand tall in our truth, and to refuse to be victims of anyone else's narrative. We must refuse to let fear or external expectations dictate our lives. Life is too short to live in silence, to be overshadowed by the voices of others. Like Jane, we all deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to take control of our own futures. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been made to feel like you don't matter, it's time to take back your power. Speak up, act boldly, and make the decisions that are right for you. Don't let anyone silence you. What are your thoughts on reclaiming your voice in a world that often tries to silence you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a conversation about how we can all begin to take control of our own stories.